Welcome to a amazing conversation today on this Wednesday. If you have ever felt as if that you're just juggling a whole bunch of things and you still don't know how this can still play a part into being a present parent, being a present spouse, or just being a present person because we're trying to go after our own goals and dreams and aspirations, and sometimes it feels as if we don't have enough to give to everyone. So I thought this will be an amazing conversation. I have an awesome guest that I have today that I think is going to be able to add value so that you don't feel as if you're in this battle by yourself. I find that sometimes in entrepreneurship, because we can sometimes struggle with this in silence, we think that we're the only ones that are going through it. In reality, some of the things that we're going through are not so foreign to people, and it's the stuff that we can be going through with other individuals. So um one of the things that I wanted to just say, thank you, Brieanna, for being a yes to today's conversation.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So for those of you that do not know who she is, please share a little bit about what makes you you and a little bit about yourself.
Yes, so I consider myself a Jackie of all trades. I feel like I have lived 9 lives, even though I'm just 33. So I've worked as a business coach for moms who are building businesses from home. I've worked in the field of education. I've published several books. I also know and am very acquainted with being burned out because I passed out in my car when I was 7 months pregnant with my oldest son, Jaden.
Mhm.
I am a mom of three, soon to be four children,
Mhm.
and been married to my husband for going on 9 years. And we actually met in college, so we've been together for a really long time.
Wow.
And it's kind of fun because I feel like we've been able to see each other through the different iterations of what career looks like for us, what family looks like for us. We've
Mhm.
lived in like four different places, even over the course of 9 years. And so it's
Mhm.
just really cool to have that support and someone to be like, hey, this was something you did really well in this season. Maybe it's something to revisit, or have the accountability of like, yeah, I know you did that for that period of time, but maybe that season has expired.
Yeah.
And it really lends itself well to what we're going to be talking about today, because I think that one of the blessings and benefits, and even one of the reasons why I've been able to quote unquote live so many lives, is that my husband has really given me that space to explore those things and to have
Mhm.
that margin. There were seasons where it was like, I don't really know what this gonna look like. And he was like, well, take some time to explore that, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have to give ourselves that same permission to explore things, whether or not we're married.
Yeah, and I think that it's powerful to just even have those conversations, like having the space, because we're all going to evolve regardless if it's a partner there or not. And it's even more to consider when we're evolving, then there's a partner, and then there's also kids, that are involved in it. Like I'm in Charlotte right now because I'm watching my aunts and uncles, three littles. So even for them, it's having to, they both have careers and aspirations, and it's not going to be looking perfect all the time. I mean, sometimes we have to rely on our village to make it work. But if we don't talk about it, because I feel like that's really the core of it, is that we need to have more conversations instead of going through this long suffering of feeling, because you hear these stories of someone's like waking up and then they're like 40 years old and they're like, oh, I don't even know me, what I
Who
really,
I am anymore.
yeah, and all this stuff's like, well, there should have been conversation, it's not gonna.
Right. You like, how did we get way over here? At
Yeah,
no point
like
was
there
there
should have
like a
been some
check-in.
discovery at some point,
Right.
or at least being inquisitive at some point. So,
Yeah.
one of the first questions that I do have for you is like, if you don't mind sharing, like, what has been your own personal journey when it comes to balancing business and your family life, and what keeps you, what would you say is keeps you inspired for other moms to do the same?
Absolutely. I think that I have really um, done the pendulum swing, right? Like
Mhm.
I've been hardcore business and like the family will figure it out type of thing,
Mhm.
where I had this quote that someone shared with me, which tortured me for years. They said, once a woman is a mom, that's all she'll ever be. And I was like, I bet you that ain't about to be my story, right? And it was like, okay, ma'am, you went all the way to the point of like people didn't even know you were a mom because you
Yeah.
were out here so thick in the business.
Yeah.
And then I've gone the opposite direction of I was a full-time stay-at-home mom for 3 years. I've homeschooled my children. I've done just been all in and been the full-time housewife, homemaker type thing. And what I will say is that my sweet spot really has been in those seasons where I created a structure in my life that made space for everything in my life, right? I was
Yeah.
actually having a conversation with some people earlier today about how passionate I am about integration, because I think
Mhm.
that a lot of times we are like, okay, I have this hat on when I'm over here, and then I take that hat off, and I have this hat on when I'm in this space. And what I've realized is like we're wearing multiple hats just through we can wear them throughout the day. It's not like you have
Yeah.
to take one fully off and put another one on. And I've seen the way that I manage my household has positively impacted my business. I've seen the way that I manage my business impacts and influences my household. And so I think for me, it's been about not finding balance, but finding harmony and I literally mean like when you think about Pitch Perfect comes to mind, right?
Yeah.
Like, and them doing a cappella singing and how everybody needs to be on key for it to sound beautiful. And when someone's off key, you notice.
Yeah.
For me, it's more about like, how do I accentuate the best parts of each of these different elements of my life so that when all the sounds play together, like it sounds good, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so that looks like, to my children, being very clear with them about when I am working and being and clear about like my schedule. Like they know
Yeah.
Wednesday mornings mommy does Bible study, then she has a meeting at 2, then she has this,
Yeah.
and being and then letting them know what their schedules are, to the point
Yeah.
where now sometimes I'm like, it felt like a good idea to tell you what the rundown was for today, but now you're like, okay, and then after this we're gonna do this. And I'm kind of like, wow, I created that. I made that them like that. But I think it's creating space for the things that you care about
Hmm.
in your everyday, so that it's not like you go on this 3-month sprint and you're all about the business, and
Yeah.
then you get burned out, and then you want to throw the business away, and then
Yeah.
you go on a 3-month wellness retreat, but then you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have any money because I've just been like frolicking, right? And
Yeah.
then you're just constantly, it's almost like playing hopscotch trying to figure out where your perfect spot is,
Yeah.
instead of trying to figure out what are the ways I can make space for all of the things that I care about in every season.
Yeah. And even from what I hear you sharing, it's one, like, boundaries. And I think sometimes when people hear boundaries, they can think, or they think of it in a negative way, like people disrespect my boundaries. But I think it's even like if we even get before the disrespect, is actually
Mhm.
communicating that. So
Absolutely.
having that, but then also I hear the beauty of being flexible in certain spaces. And
Yeah.
I think that that is something that's so important when we're talking about this creating margins, is like both can still be true. You can
Yeah.
still have boundaries, but you can still have flexibility in your schedule to be committed to the things in which you're committed to.
Yeah. And I think tying into what, like, even if you think about what a margin actually is, right? Like
Hmm.
on our papers that we used to have the 1.5 margin around, like it's that white space. And I think
Yeah.
that that's sometimes the reason why people don't feel like they can establish boundaries. If you think about boundaries like white space instead,
Yeah.
and saying, hey, I'm trying to give myself room for
Hmm.
life to happen, I'm giving myself the flexibility to not have to run from one meeting to the next, or
Yeah.
I'm not, if I know I have this commitment that I really want to show up fully for, well, maybe I'm not going to schedule it right before a school pickup because I'm gonna
Yeah.
be stressed and I'm gonna be looking like, oh, I really need to go and get my kids, like
Yeah.
it's about creating the systems in your life that really support what you value in a particular season. And I love
Yeah.
that you said the flexibility piece, because the truth of the matter is, the things that matter to me as a mom of four look different than the things that matter to me as a mom of one or two,
Yeah.
right? Like the even the way that my business looks. My business has gone through probably four different evolutions, and it's
Mhm.
going through another change again.
Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes that's another part I find, is that we don't have the flexibility because we're so chained to who we've been in a previous season, and we're trying to
Mhm.
get back to that person instead of
Mhm.
just giving ourselves permission to show up as we are now, and as we want to be moving ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's so powerful. And I hope that people can receive that, because I think it, because even someone that doesn't have children, but I actually am going to start the process to becoming a foster parent next year. And so, like, even for myself, being present to just being here and taking care of the littles, like, okay, granted, I won't be taking on three children at one time. However, once they get home, they don't care about all the other things that. So I'm like, well, we're gonna have to structure this, or I will be paying so much money to have support, to be able to have that time. But then even still, they only have 3 hours that they're up after school. So do I want that 3 hours to be someone else taking care of the kid? Like, that's not why I'm deciding to be a foster parent. So, like, I think that we have to, as business owners, be present to like what we're committed to building, why is it impactful, but also what type of results we really want in our life. Because if we can have all the success, but our family and everything else is falling apart, then it's not going to be as impactful. And that actually leads into that question, is like, because some people might be like, what do they mean by creating margin? I think you explained like that, but in context of being a mom and a business owner, if you don't mind elaborating, when you're saying creating margin, like, what is going to be the easiest way for someone to understand it?
Yeah, I am a words girl. My background's actually in journalism, and so
Mm,
I love the definition of margin that says a spare amount or measure given for contingencies or special occasions or situations, right? So,
mhm.
like, because here's the deal, especially in parenthood, but in just life in general, right? Like, even you popping up and being in South Carolina, you like, okay, I didn't know that I was going to be called upon at this point. I'm glad that I have the flexibility to come, but I
Exactly.
did not, on my schedule, I did not have this on there. But no, I'm happy to help, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to you have to make room for the unexpected.
Yeah.
Even in pregnancy, right? Like,
Yeah.
I tell people, I feel like the last 8 years of my life have been kind of a start, stop, start, stop,
Yeah.
because yes, children they don't stop you from doing things, but you have to do things differently when you have children. It just is what it is. Like,
Yeah.
unless you're the parent who puts your child in a room, you don't talk to them, whatever, you just kind of let them raise themselves. Well, okay, maybe things haven't changed much for you,
Yeah.
right? But for most of us, and if you're on this live and watching this, I would imagine you're someone who is invested in your family being well, as well as yourself being well.
Yeah.
It's Things are going to shift.
Yeah.
And so for me, creating that space for contingencies, I think, tying it back to the definition is so important, because if we are committed to the goal but not flexible
Mhm.
on how we reach that goal, then when the path that we had set out for that goal changes, usually we just throw the goal away because we're like, well, that's not going to happen, right? But
Yeah.
if you say, and we're both based in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex, if you are if you're on 20 and you're taking that route and there's traffic, maybe it's going to reroute you, and okay, now you got to take 635 or you got to take 35. You're still going to reach your destination. You're just taking a route that you didn't plan on taking. And I think
Yeah.
that that's where that margin comes in, is saying, okay, I want to be really committed to the mission, but flexible about the method. And even
Mm.
being flexible about the method ties into your time frame, because
Yeah.
you may say, well, in 3 months, I'm gonna do this. And then you find out you're pregnant and you're like, I could maybe do that still, but wisdom would say I should probably move this around, right?
Yeah.
I think about my first pregnancy. I had these travel plans and everything, baby. Those had to change because they were international travel plans, and they were like, "Do you want to possibly have your baby in Bali?" And I was like, Probably not. That probably I'm like, for my first, I don't maybe
Yeah.
in future babies, but like I probably should keep it local, right?
Yeah.
Um, but that didn't take away my desire to travel. It was just
Yeah.
like, okay, what's it gonna look like to travel with my child? How often do I want my husband and I to be able to travel without our kids, you
Hmm.
know? So I think it's just I really love that it uses that word contingencies
Yeah.
because you don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes it is exciting thing too.
Yeah.
Maybe you made a plan of I'm going to do this thing in 5 years, and oh wow, surprise, it happened in 2 years for you, right? Like I know me and you both know Nia, who owns Black Lit
Yeah.
in Farmers Branch. She owns a Black owned bookstore. If you guys are in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex, you should definitely check it out, right? But she had it in her plans to open up a bookstore in 5 years. It happened in two.
Yeah.
So that's another situation where you need to be flexible. If things are happening at a pace that's faster than you anticipated,
Yeah.
you don't want to be like, oh, I got to shut it down. This is beyond me. You know, you want to open up yourself to say, well, that was faster than I thought it was going to be. So, what's the
Yeah.
support that I need to be able to keep this thing going?
Yeah, I love that. And so then I would love for you to share what are some practical steps that you would advise specifically moms to take when it comes to looking to create this margins, because we see how important it is, but what are some tangible steps that they, or what does that look like in your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always love to share with people my BLT method. I like sharing it because it's easy. If you're a sandwich person, like I love a good sandwich. And
I
so I
do
never
too.
forget. But the B stands for brain dumping, the L stands for list, and then the T is your time, right? So you're
Yeah.
taking the time to do the task.
Yeah.
The brain dump is literally dumping out all of the things you feel like you do on either a weekly basis, a monthly basis, maybe even every day.
Hmm.
And then you're listing those things out. I think it's important to list them according to category.
Yeah.
For the longest, I would say probably the last several years, I have kind of used this system that Patrice Washington,
Mm.
who's phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
Phenomenal woman based in Atlanta. She talks about the 6 pillars of wealth, right?
Yeah.
And wellness. And so for the longest, I would kind of categorize my tasks and things like that under those pillars. Your fit pillar, your space pillar, your work pillar, your money pillar, your people pillar. Um, but I've actually shifted because this year I realized like my values in this season are freedom, family, faith, flow, and
Mm.
fulfillment.
I love
So
that.
I am actually restructuring and identifying, okay, out of all of the things that I brain dumped, which of those things actually tie to these values, right?
Mm.
And I'm listing them out. And if they don't fall under those values, then they don't make it to the take time thing, right? Because the
Yeah.
take time is when you're actually putting time on your calendar
Hmm.
to do the things that you have listed out. And what you will find typically is that you're going to have more margin just off the straight fact of these things don't even align with what I say I care about, right? Like
Yeah.
this came from a internet personality. This was in a book I read and I thought that would be a cool idea, but it actually doesn't tie to any goals that I'm pursuing right now, right?
Yeah.
I think what happens is that our lives, you know, we're obviously we're preparing for a baby to come, and so the analogy that's coming to my mind is just sometimes people get you stuff, and I'm so grateful everyone has gotten us stuff off of our registry. Thank you for all the people who buy things off the registry. But you know, you got those family members that just like, I saw this and I thought it was cute, and you're like, it doesn't fit our color scheme, or like, you know, that outfit is cute but I would never put my baby in that, or
Yeah.
baby, you've never been to our house, this is too huge, it's not gonna
It'll
fit.
fit.
Like
Yeah.
they have these things that were given to you with good intention, but they don't fit into your life.
Yeah.
And I think that that's again how a lot of our schedules get filled, is because people come with really great intentions
Yeah.
and they pile all this stuff onto our plate, and we're like, okay, well, I mean, it's not bad for you, so yeah, go ahead and pile it on. But then you look up and you don't have space in your life for the things that you really care about because
Yeah.
you make other people's priorities your priorities.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that people can see how that happens. And not even know that that is what's occurring, you know? And then what
Yeah.
happens is that they almost take it on as a, and because then, or they just be quiet about it. And then all of these breakdowns are occurring because people that may have had great intentions,
Yeah.
but now it's a burden onto you and
Yeah.
not being able to speak up. And I
Yeah.
know that you're saying about time and stuff, and I know some people are gonna be like, okay, but there's not enough time, and I, you know, all these different things. So, what advice would do you give for moms who struggle with guilt when it comes to taking time with it from their for their businesses, from like their family, or just for
Absolutely.
themselves?
Yeah. I would say you have to understand that you are your best asset.
Mhm.
We are so good at, and again, I can say this confidently, knowing the type of women that you serve, knowing the type
Mhm.
of people that, are attracted to the content that you create. Like,
Yeah,
we want to show up in excellence. And so we will invest in the program, we will invest in the coach. I know that Jess is all about systems, right? So we like,
yeah,
yes, baby, get my systems together, do these things.
yeah,
But we have to realize if we're not investing in ourselves, like, that does not matter if you're not here to run the business. And
yeah.
I talked to someone else today. She is a we were in a program together. She built her business up to $1 million company,
Wow.
and she was like, but I resented work. Like, I got up in the
Mm,
morning and I was driving into the office and I was like, why am I doing this? She was like, I was going to close the whole thing down. And ultimately she didn't end up doing that. She did
yeah,
shift some things. She did fire some people because she was like, okay, part of my stress is all this payroll that I'm having to dish
yeah,
out every month,
yeah,
right? Like, but if you understand that you're your best investment, I think it makes it easier to
mm,
take the time away. And y'all, like, I feel like we're maybe starting to get back into, and we're going into the direction of understanding that self-care is not just taking yourself to get your nails done or going to
yeah,
getting a massage. Because if you get this massage and then you get back up and you're just as stressed because the whole time you were laying down on the table, you were going through your to-do list of what you need to
yeah,
do, or where your time would be better spent than, if you feel like it's almost like, oh, this is unnecessary. I don't really need this, right?
yeah.
But do you really want to wait till you have a breakdown? Do you want to? And my dad said this years ago, and it really stuck with me. He lost a lot of weight, and I never felt like my dad was overweight, but
Right.
he got really committed to losing weight. And he said there were a couple of things that were triggers for him. One, my sons wanted him to pick them up, and he couldn't do it because his back hurt too much,
Mm,
because the where he was carrying his weight was pressing down on a disc in his back, and so he
yeah.
could not pick my boys up. And he's like, I need to be able to pick up my grandsons and play with them. That was number one. Number two, he was getting um injections to help with the pain, and the
Mm,
injections were like $1,800, right?
yeah,
Something obnoxious,
yeah,
right? And he's like, okay, so I can either pay for things on the front end that are preventative,
mm,
or I can pay for these things that are actually not even, they only help for 3 months. You have to come in several
yeah.
times a year to get
Exactly.
them done. He's like, does that make sense? And so I would suggest it's not even always a financial investment, but taking the time to think, taking the time to spend time with people that you love, taking
Yeah.
the time to eat by yourself. Listen, taking the time to eat in the car. We're not gonna judge you, because
No.
listen, I've had many a car date. Listen, sit in the car, eat, like, whatever it is, it's really helpful. And I can speak for myself. When I started pouring into myself, I noticed the way that I showed up for my family was different,
Mm,
because I wasn't showing up in a way that, yes, maybe they still got what they needed, but there was this underlying current of resentment or
yeah,
bitterness, because it was like, do you know what all I could be doing with this time? Or like,
yeah,
do you know what I've sacrificed in
yeah,
order to be here? And it's like, okay, if you don't remind me all the time, you better off just going ahead and doing what you sacrificed in order to be here, right? So
yeah,
I think we have to release that idea that we're taking away from our children or our business by investing in ourselves, and actually recognize that we're actually multiplying. We're not subtracting, we're multiplying. Because if I take that time to even go to something simple, right? If you take the time to go to bed earlier, now when you wake up the next morning, you're rested, your
Yeah.
mind is clear, as opposed to doing what you're calling me time, watching TV for 2 hours or scrolling on your phone for several hours. And now you've got all these other people's ideas
Yeah.
and thoughts and suggestions instead of your own clear brain that says, hey, you know, that even tells you to check on a person, or you get that idea for that project and then that gets wiped out because you just see this person who's like, I just made $15 million by doing this, and you like, listen, I need to do what they're doing. So I know I just had my own $1 million idea,
Yeah.
but this is what's in front of me, right? Like
Yeah.
we have to recognize that we're the prize, we're the investment, and at the end of the day, if we're investing in ourselves, and even as our careers change, even as our businesses change, even as our children grow up and get out of the house,
Yeah.
like the core foundation of who we are is the same.
Yeah. No, I think that that's so valuable, because even like last night when my aunt is leaving, like the kids, they do, they're going to, oh my god, they're going to do that. But I know that that also had to, like, it still makes it kind of tugs at the heart for the mom. And when she got out and they were up in the bed and sleeping like 20 minutes or so, and I just text them like, hey, just so you know, they're good, and they're in bed and they're fine. Have a good trip. And even while she was, talking to them, she was like, mommy's gonna be back. And we talk, like, mommy loves what she gets to do, and I don't go away often. And just like, and I think that's also a
Yeah,
part of the balance of it all, is having communication. Like, some kids will
yeah,
get it, but as they get older, they'll get it. And it's finding,
yeah.
this balance of it all. And as we kind of are getting, I guess, towards the end, I wanted you to be able to share, like, what's one thing that you wish all mom entrepreneurs knew about achieving balance inside of, or the margins inside of their business, and how it's impacted your life.
I think if I could give any woman, like you said, mom or not, some advice or an encouragement, it would just be that permission. I would want to give her permission to shift,
Mm.
because I think that we can get so committed to previous versions of ourselves, or
Hmm.
so obsessed with future potential versions of
Yeah.
ourselves, that we don't adjust well to change, right?
Mm.
Like, you have to move suddenly, you weren't expecting that, or your spouse gets a maybe they get a promotion, but that's going to
Hmm.
require more hours for them, which means that the way your schedule used to be set up, it can't look like that anymore, because it
Yeah.
requires, it, there are these dynamic shifts that are just going to happen in life. And I
Yeah.
think that I think about it being like clay that's been in the fire versus clay that hasn't, right? If
Yeah.
you've ever gone to one of those throwing classes and you've made a pie, right? Like, if it starts looking funky, you like, actually, I don't know if this is the way I want to go, you can smash it and put it back together,
Yeah.
and or smash it and restart, right?
Yeah.
But after it's gone in the kiln, now it's hard. And so if you try to change it'll break. If you drop
Yeah.
it, it'll break. If you drop clay, guess what? You just pick it up and you keep molding it. But
Yeah.
if you drop a clay pot that's already been in the kiln, well, then it breaks. And I feel
Yeah.
like we treat our lives so much more like the pot that's already formed than clay.
Yeah.
And not having that flexibility causes a lot of stress. Again, it causes a lot of resentment, because you tell yourself, like, well, this isn't where I thought my life would go, or this isn't
Mm.
how I thought things were going to be, or,
Yeah.
you know, and there's not even any room for, and I know both of us are women of faith, like,
Yeah.
there's not any room for God to even surprise you or blow your mind, because you are so fixated on how
Yeah.
you thought stuff was supposed to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things I'm so grateful for in being a mom, that in the same way it physically stretches your body before they get here,
Yeah.
like, it has stretched my mind and shown me I have a capacity and a bandwidth that I did not understand that I had.
Yeah.
And I think that if we would be willing to expand to fill this space that we've been given, because we're giving larger space, like, in the same
Yeah.
way that they are enlarging your body, they're enlarging your territory, they're
Yeah.
enlarging your thought processes. If we would fill that up instead of just being so confined and being like, but this is how this was supposed to go, then I feel like we would have maximum impact. And so I just want women to give themselves that permission, and also to tell people when they feel that, when they're like, I know this is the way we've always done stuff.
Yeah.
And this is even just in your home. You're like, I know this used to be the routine, but I don't know if this is the move anymore.
Yeah.
I homeschooled for 2 years, and it got to a point where I was like, you know what? I feel like the season has expired. And, I talked to my husband, I talked to other people. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't just jump and make the decision, but I told quite a few people, I said, I did not want to just have the badge of being a homeschool mom for the sake of having that badge.
Yeah.
But, I'm a homeschool mom, but I resent it, or my children are falling behind because we haven't done lessons in 3 weeks, or,
Yeah.
like, I was like, that's not cute. And so it's the same thing for us in our businesses.
Yeah.
You go to these networking events and you introduce yourself as a CEO of this and that, but when you go home, you don't even want to work on the business that you're talking about, because that was maybe from a previous season, or maybe you created it and it was never the thing you liked, but everyone was like, but you're so good at it. Oh my gosh. But like, you make it look so easy. And so you tell yourself, well, that's what they say. They say you're supposed to monetize your passions and like, which is another reason why that white space is so important. If you give yourself the margin to actually ask yourself, do I enjoy this? Like, are people being positively impacted by the work that I'm doing? Is this something I can see myself doing 3, 5, 7, 10 years from now? Then you'll be able to notate, like, okay, this was perfect for that previous season, but as I'm moving into this new season, I feel like I have to shift. And then giving yourself the space to do that slowly if needed. You don't have to just jump from one thing to one thing because you don't want people to feel like you had downtime or like you were being lazy. Like, if you need to take 6 months and figure out what this new path looks like, then do that. Because something that, and I'll end with this, something that God has shared with me that is really helpful. He said, if what you're building is you want to have for life, like, what's the rush, right? And I understand we don't know how long we're going to live. For some people, for life is to the age of 35. For some people, for life is 90, right? But he's like, if this is your legacy that we're building, not just a one-time passion project, like, why not fall in love with the process? Why not be excited about the different skill sets that you're learning along the way, instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, I did this, it didn't result in the thing that I thought it was going to result in, and that was a waste. Nothing is ever wasted,
At all. Oh, that's so awesome. Well, I am going to make sure to put your contact information and your links down so that you can connect with this amazing person. I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for just being a yes and agreeing. And I have a feeling that this is going to touch so many people, because I feel like it's a topic that people kind of, just like I mentioned, struggle in silence with. So thank you again for everything.
For having me.
You're so very welcome.